Hello, everyone. Thelma Meneses, and I am an executive coach, an HR consultant, and a director of POWERinU. I just joined the company a few months ago. And I welcome you to the complimentary webinar on women leaders on future of work, wellness, and innovation. So I'd like first to introduce our host, our guest. We have a different format tonight, as one of our guest speakers will have a short presentation, followed by a panel discussion with our two guest speakers. The speaker of tonight's presentation is Eunice Braga. She started her career writing for local publications such as the Philippine Daily Inquirer and Chalk, and managing corporate PR campaigns at multinational marketing communications agency, Ogilvy. She then went on to lead the marketing and communication team at Idea Space Foundation and QBO Innovation Hub, a startup support organization for Philippine tech startups. She recently made a jump to solopreneurship, doing communications, consulting for organizations, running her own newsletter, Curiosities, and continuing her mentoring duties at Idea Space and QBO Innovation Hub. Eunice will talk about what can we learn from fandoms in terms of creating better work cultures, and as a longtime creator, lurker, and commenter in fan spaces, Eunice believes that organizations and communities can learn a thing or two from fandoms on how to encourage creativity, connection, and community in their own spaces. Everyone, let us all welcome Eunice Braga as she talks about 5 lessons from fandoms to create better work culture. Eunice?
Hi everyone, good evening. So let me just share my screen so you can get the presentation rolling. So yeah, just let me know everyone if you can see my screen. And if you can hear me well, just let me and the team know via the chat. So yeah, so let's start. Thank you, Telma, for that wonderful introduction. So I don't have a lot of time, so I'm gonna get right to it. I'm just gonna start with a brief definition of some terms that I'll be using throughout the presentation, and then also talk about some of the things that I've observed being in fandom that I really feel organizations should learn from. And then the last part is just a few suggestions so that people can start incorporating some of these norms in fandoms into their own work, their teams, or even in your organizations. So yeah. So just a bit of fandom 101 for everyone who's not active. I guess basic definition, fandoms or communities that are really based around shared interest and enjoyment of pop culture. A lot of it is around books, TV shows, music, bands, even sports teams. And fandoms are actually considered as participatory cultures. So what I mean by that, I'm borrowing a definition from Henry Jenkins, where he says that it's not just about fans consuming what is existing, like books or TV shows or movies or the games that sports teams are participating in, but also producing and creating some form of creative media. There's two kinds of fandoms, and this is that people like to talk about. These are actually a bit outdated, but I think for the purpose of this discussion, I'm gonna use them. First is affirmational fandom, where it's really heavy on uh, the source material or the canon and understanding what the authors or the creators intended and why they created certain rules or characters that way. And sort of subset of that is curative fandom, which is actually collecting and organizing things, information, records as part of a fandom activity. The thing that I really want to focus on for this particular call and this particular webinar is the second type of fandom, which is transformative fandom. That's really all about creating and challenging the source material, and engaging with what's available to create something new from it. Fan work. This is also something that I'll be talking about extensively during this particular webinar. It really refers to things and or experiences that are made by fans. So that covers things like fan fiction, fan art, videos or edits. If you've been on TikTok and you've seen those videos that are focused on a specific character, a specific duo or group, you've probably seen a fan video. And this also can cover things like clothes, accessories, stickers, and other types of merchandise. Stan, if you're online, you might have seen this, especially from people who are fans of certain K-pop groups or sports teams or even celebrities. The dictionary definition, because it's actually part of the Merriam-Webster dictionary, is that a stan is someone who's extremely enthusiastic and devoted. It actually comes from an Eminem song about someone who's obsessed with Eminem. So that's a bit of etymology for our audience. And then particularly when we talk about music or celebrity focused fandoms, stans are types of fans that can be really obsessed about data, sales, records, where the songs are charting, and also a bit of gossip as well. So if you want to know things that aren't reported in mainstream media or chismes or conjecture, you probably want to look for stans. Okay. Another slide. Big name fans. There's someone who's well known or prominent in the fandom. Usually because they've taken care of leadership and admin, or because they've produced fan work that's become really popular in the fandom or in the community. And then a lurker. This is someone who consumes stuff but doesn't really make themselves known. They're pretty quiet. I would extend lurking to include occasional commenting, but the very traditional definition means they don't engage with the community at all. So yeah, that's a bit of fandom 101 for everyone. So my fascination and why I've really been interested in fandom, specifically transformative fandom, is because I've been in it for 2 decades now. I started out as someone who's just like lurking and reading fan fiction, and then in college I started joining fandoms of shows and movies that I really felt passionate about, and I started becoming known in a small way in one of my original fandoms as a fan fiction writer and creator. And the thing that really drew me to transformative fandom in particular is that it's a space that encourages creativity. It's a place where people can be leaders and contributors despite of their background, their engagement level, or their contribution. It's also a space where there's a lot of fluidity in roles and the level of engagement. And it's also a place where people can be seen as leaders and experts, even just by encouraging or facilitating discussion in the community, which is really, I think, antithetical or not something that we see in traditional work culture.
Eunice, excuse me, your slides are not moving.
Oh, which slide are we on?
It's still on the title page.
Oh,
Sorry
no.
about that. Yeah.
Let me just restart that.
You're muted.
Sorry, let me know if you can see the slide now.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So yeah. So as I was saying, yeah, my interest in fandom, let me just go back to my previous slide. Let me know if you can see it.
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, so as I was saying, yeah, my fascination really comes from fandom, transformative fandom specifically being a space for creativity. It's also a place where people can find community regardless of their background, engagement level, or contribution. As someone who identifies as part of like the LGBTQ community, it's actually in fandom where I first met people who were from the same community and had the same like sexual orientation, the similar experiences. It's also a place where there's a lot of fluidity in terms of roles and the level of engagement that you have in the community. And it's also a place where people can become experts or be seen as leaders, even when you're just facilitating and encouraging discussion. So let me move to my next slide. Again, let me know if you can see it on screen or not. And then where I really wanted to take this discussion is a lot of the talk around the future of work has been really centered on tools and spaces. Where do we work? Should people come back to the office? People should go back to the office. And the talk about generative AI and generative AI tools and how that can potentially impact our work. And while that's important, I feel like it's overtaken the discussion on the future of work to an almost unreasonable extent. And for me, the future of work and the discussion around that should really be centered on people and culture. And that's why I wanted to talk about fandoms, because I've learned a lot from being in fandom and being in fan communities about what makes a healthy space and what kind of space encourages creativity, leadership, and connection. And I really think it's something that more leaders and organizations can learn from. So let's get right to it. What can we learn from fandom? From
Eunice,
transfer.
your deck is not moving.
Sorry. Which slide are we on?
Tools and spaces should not determine the future of work.
Yeah. Let me know if we've switched slides now.
Not
Sorry.
yet.
Are you
Not yet.
currently? Oh, okay. Let me stop share again. I'm not sure if that's an internet issue. Sorry about that. Let me know if you can see it on your screen. It should say low hierarchy, high trust.
Yes, we see it. Thank
Okay,
you.
fantastic. So yeah, so one characteristic of fandoms that I feel leaders and organizations can learn more from is the fact that transformative fandoms in particular tend to be low on hierarchy and high on trust. So people come together out of that shared interest. And that's really the starting point for a fan community. And leaders tend to emerge based on their level of commitment, engagement, quality of work, and positive feedback. So when I was new to the Carmilla fandom, which was actually based off of a YouTube web series, the community really started to come together when people started sharing gifs or videos and started discussing the show and its background. And that's really where the big name fans or the leaders started to come from. In fandom, there's a respect for seniority as there is in traditional work cultures. But unlike traditional work cultures, it's not the sole source of respect or leadership. What that means is I can come into a fandom and be relatively new compared to someone who has been there since day one. And if I produce high quality work and I engage with an audience. For example, I create fan videos or fan fiction, and I engage with the audience and build an audience. I can be considered a big name fan or a leader in the community, even just being there for a couple of months. Or if we're talking about sports, one of my favorite sports fandoms, of course, is the NBA. Just like a lot of Filipinos, I do love basketball in the NBA community on Reddit, one way that people can actually gain positive reputation is if you make very informed edits of games and actually include your expertise in sports, if you notice things like what moves contribute to certain injuries, or what are player tendencies that you've picked up from watching games, you actually tend to build a positive reputation in the community in that way, because you're giving something of value to the rest of your fellow fans. Another thing that's really interesting for me is that you can actually change your level of engagement and not have it affect your status in the community. Whereas in traditional work cultures, you probably will get noticed if you have a high level of engagement, or you go from a high level of engagement to a lower level of engagement. That's seen as a problem in transformative fandom and transformative fandom communities. That's not really a problem. People tend to understand that there's more to life than just being part of the fandom, and that your level of engagement can vary, not day to day, it's month to month, or even year to year. Then let me know if you can see this slide. So we're not talking about the second quality of fandoms and fan communities that I feel people can learn from. That is a strong sense of shared purpose. So if you join a fandom, you know what you're there for. And really, it starts out as shared interest. In certain fandoms, it just goes beyond the interest, and a lot of what you're there for is because you also share the values that the group espouses. So if you've met a BTS fan, for example, you know that there's a sense of openness and vulnerability and joy in that community. And a lot of the fans reflect that as well. To that point, fans actually see themselves as extensions of the organizations or the things that they're fans of, and they make sure that they show their support and act accordingly. So, for example, a lot of the K-pop groups, especially the ones that have more mature or sophisticated fandoms, sophisticated because they're older. Also because of the level of organization, there are chapters across cities, if not across countries, and there is a tendency for people to be well organized, and there's a certain level of structure. Fans actually organize charity drives or other similar do-gooding activities during significant milestones such as the group's anniversary, birthdays. If the group hits certain chart records or makes a certain level of sales, and they celebrate that by doing charity drives, donating to certain CSR activities, or to advocacies that are close to either that specific chapter's heart, or even the band or the band members' hearts. So a lot of that is not just showing their support for the group, but actually espousing the values that the group says they have. And fans adopt those things as a result. And not just to encourage a sense of like connection with the things that they're fan of, but sort of empower that relationship that they do have with the band or the group that they're a fan of. Let me know if you can see the screen. So another thing about transformative fandoms specifically is, while traditional work culture is challenged by remote first or remote only situations, fandoms are very much used to being based online. Older fan groups probably started offline. That's true for things like Star Trek or Star Wars, or even like fans of your sports teams. They tend to start offline. But if you're a transformative fandom of a book or TV show that's come out recently, you do tend to be based online. So that means that there's a high reliance or high use of tools to bring people together in the community, to facilitate discussions, and to create fan work. and how that bleeds into day-to-day life in fandom is that creators are very proactive when it comes to setting expectations, and they make sure to communicate as regularly as they can, as often as they can, and they actually see it as part of their responsibility to their audience. Someone who's been reading fan fiction for over a decade now, it's not uncommon to see authors including notes saying that, hey, this is a new work, this is what you can expect from this work, and this is how often I'll be updating this. And if it takes a while before they make an update, in the next chapter that they post, they tend to include explanations as to why it took them a while to update and what they can expect from that point forward. So speaking of breaks and taking a long time, breaks and sabbaticals are actually expected and supported now. Before, it used to be kind of an issue because, especially for someone who creates fan work, if you go too long between chapters, between videos, or between work, people tend to drop off. But now people, I think, are more understanding of the fact that sometimes life just gets in the way, and sometimes authors or creators just want to take a step back from their work. So the audience tends to respond in kind and encourage that, and that's allowed. That doesn't diminish your standing or your status in the community. And then from the audience side of things, feedback and regular communication are valued and are actually seen as essential inputs to the fan community. So especially for creating fan work like videos or merchandise or fan fiction, creators really value it if you give them feedback, if you give them constructive criticism, and if you engage with them on a regular basis, because they don't do this for money. So they see the feedback as a reward in itself. Let me just move to my next slide. Let me know if you are seeing the next slide. We should be on the authenticity is valuable slide. So just send me a thumbs up if you can see it. So yeah, fantastic. So authenticity is a valued value. Sorry to be a bit redundant in fan communities. So people really do tend to view you more favorably the more you share of yourself, and especially the context or the culture where you're coming from, especially in creating fan work. So I don't know if a lot of folks here are from TikTok, but if you are, you might have seen the video of Taylor Swift's Eras Tour, quote unquote, being organized by Taylor Swift fans in a mall in Quezon City. That actually spread to Taylor Swift fans across the world, and especially for the ones where the concerts are actually being held in the US. They found it really interesting that, one, we just did a fan created thing. Two, we were able to put together a big crowd for it, and three, that there's so much fan activity around something that's not even happening in the Philippines. So people like to see like very country specific or culture specific celebrations of fandom, and that diversity is celebrated in these kinds of fan communities. Another thing that I've also started to see, especially with K-pop groups, and the bigger ones like BTS also attract a lot of people from different industries and walks of life. So there's actually a group of BTS fans who create sort of academic journal or fan studies journal focused on research, where BTS is the research topic. So that's been interesting because the academic research and the fandom, being part of a fandom, bleeds into each other, and they become just part of who you are, and that's shared across different audiences, whether it's their fellow fans or other fellow members of the academe. Um, Another thing that I really like about fandom is there's generally a lower view of clout chasing, or for people who are doing things solely for popularity or monetary benefit. If you're based in the Philippines, you might have seen some media media outlets talk about a convention, a fan convention that went a bit awry a few days back, and a lot of that is because fans felt like their expectations were not fulfilled by that convention, and that the creators of the convention seem to have focused on selling tickets over delivering a positive experience for fans. So in that regard, connected to that, there's really a positive view of creators or members or leaders in fan communities really focused on working on their craft, on improving the quality of the work that they do, and on really delivering that good experience for people in the community. So another thing that I think is fascinating about fandoms is the fact that these tend to design for the community. They don't please for higher ups or even for the fandom or the companies that that make the source material or put together the bands or the sports teams that they're fans of. The spaces, places, and the tools where people gather are chosen or created based on what works for the community. So you see fan communities that are still on old school, early web type forums. You also see them on Discord or Slack or Facebook groups. And a lot of it is really because they want to keep accessibility in mind. Sometimes people don't like Slack or Discord, so they tend to congregate on Facebook. There's probably subgroups that might be on Twitter because they like the real time feedback that they get there. And there's definitely a positive view of creators, event organizers, leaders, or members who keep things like accessibility, challenges, or context in mind when creating. So, for example, if you know that there's a number of members of your group that are having challenges with their eyesight or their hearing, for example, and you're someone who creates fan videos where there's captions, that's definitely appreciated. Or if you're publishing fan fiction and keep in mind that, hey, maybe some people have difficulties reading and you format things accordingly, that's definitely appreciated as well. So just very intentional designing of spaces, intentional when it comes to selection of tools. And so how can you start to incorporate these things in your day-to-day work or in your organization? So first, for me, the most important thing is really to be clear about your purpose. People assume that when you apply to a particular organization, that you're joining it specifically for what that organization stands for or what goals you want to achieve. Sometimes that's not the case. There are some people who might join you because your hours are better than what they were used to, or they might be joining specifically to work on a certain project or work for a certain person. So it's on the onus of the organization specifically to bring them in when it comes to talking about the purpose, the values that you expect people to live by, and how you expect them to act, especially as a representative of your organization. Two, building trust and psychological safety by making healthy communication the norm. So make things like feedback and constructive criticism expected. Get to know people beyond what they do in the workplace, and build that actual relationship with them. And then also, as much as you can, really cut down the use of titles that signal hierarchy. And that should be a good start for building a low hierarchy, high trust organization or work culture. Then also create opportunities where people can participate and lead without gatekeeping them by their expertise, title, and tenure. Sometimes a lot of these opportunities for leadership tend to go to the people who are already in leadership positions. When in fact, you might get new inputs or learn new things from people who are less senior, or even people who are seen as like low engagement or low participation. So you can do these in such a small setting like meetings, where you don't encourage the leaders and the managers to start and end meetings, so that there's less agenda setting and agenda stamping, and you encourage things to be discussed in a more organic way. Start with the problem that you're trying to solve, or the topic that you want to discuss, and get people to come in with inputs and start from there. Uh, and that should encourage like a more welcoming space for people to participate and eventually lead. Fourth, this might be beneficial to folks who are in HR and currently hiring. Maybe look at informal projects, and things that people are doing outside of their work hours as part of their experience and expertise. There are a lot of people working on fan projects, and this is probably very marketing and comms heavy, where you can actually leverage those experiences for the work that they're going to be hired for. And I do think that this is something that's going to be more prevalent in the future, where what people do as part of hobbies or organizations they are part of outside of work, will be considered part of their work experience or expertise in the future. And I think it should be, because those skills are being harnessed and being utilized, and they're learning quote unquote soft skills such as collaboration and ideation, critical thinking outside of work. So I think that should be counted. And I think the organizations that do so will be looked at more positively in the future.
So thank you so much, Eunice. You have been very, very helpful in providing us an understanding of fandom. And no, I can't thank you enough in
Yeah.
behalf of POWERinU and the attendees. So if you have questions for Eunice later on, please feel free to type them in the chat box, and we'll try to raise them as we proceed with our next segment of the webinar. Eunice, do you need to wrap up something, or complete something else, or any message that you want?
Yeah, I think for me, as I said earlier, the future of work is really in people and culture. And
Yeah.
once we start learning from places like fandoms on how to create a more positive work culture, I think we'll go in a better direction. So yeah, that's it for me.
Wonderful. Amazing. Thank you very much, Eunice. For our panelists, you've already met Eunice. So let me introduce our other guest speaker and panelist, Miss Jessica de Mesa. Jessica de Mesa has 14 years of experience in healthcare, e-commerce, retail, marketing, partnering, and business development. With her new startup, Kindred, Jess gives Filipinos access to a range of quality health and wellness services. Formerly a nurse, she has also been the commercial director of Zalora Philippines and was a key member of Zalora's parent company, Global Fashion Group. Jessica was a registered nurse for 4 years and has cared for patients in advocating for Filipino family or Filipino talent to help expand their businesses online. So Jess takes pride in mentoring women, entrepreneurs, and women who are just starting their careers or changing careers. She believes helping others navigate obstacles to career advancement and providing positive guidance on how to tackle new and unprecedented challenges they confront can be of enormous benefit to the community. So everyone, let's all welcome Jessica de Mesa, and welcome back to Eunice Braga. Hi, Jessica.
Good evening. Hi, very nice to be here. Pleasure.
Yeah, so we're going to have a Q&A, and I encourage everyone to send your questions through chat or click the raise your hand icon so you can be called and unmuted. We'll try to ask as many questions as we can as long as our remaining time permits. So My first question really is with Eunice. So Eunice, the future of work has been strongly influenced by tech and especially by technology, and especially the young millennials are married and bonded to the internet, and therefore social media in particular is really a very strong platform. On the other hand, in parallel, emerging personas like solopreneurs, I like that. That's my additional vocabulary now, or I call it gig workers, are emerging in addition to hybrid, office based,
Mhm.
remote, or even a combination. So, from a total well being perspective, how is your kind of business providing a psychological safe space within the community? Because we all know that right now the focus of different organizations is really about mental wellness,
Mhm.
and people are getting stressed so much, and then there are new trends happening in the future of workers and workplace. So how's that in the fandom? Because I'm not really very
Yeah.
familiar with, I like the idea of solopreneurship. So Eunice, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I guess as a solopreneur, which basically means I do work for myself,
Yeah.
by myself mostly. A lot of the cues that I've taken when it comes to mental health comes from other people who have been doing solopreneurship longer. So a lot of it is focused on building routines that work for me, incorporating breaks into my normal work schedule, whether on a micro level as in day to day, and on a larger, there are on a larger scale, in that I've committed to myself that there will be weeks or certain months where things will be intentionally slower for me.
That's
Eh,
good. Thank you,
so yeah, I think
Eunice.
Jessica can also give some
Yeah,
input on that.
that's true. So, Jessica, would you have an idea on what that means now for entrepreneurs like you? How can you create a psychological safety, specifically addressing the new norm, the new future, the new work that is driven by the current environment?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that question, Miss Thelma. I guess there's two parts to that because we are a healthcare provider, so we definitely provide mental health services for our patients, but of course internally as well to ensure that the team behind that is also well equipped and enabled to take better care of themselves. An example, more practical example that we do at Kindred is that we have extra leaves for mental health leave, and then we have menstrual menstrual leaves as well, as we're an almost all female team. And at the same time, we implement initiatives around health and wellness for our employees as well. And we actually subsidize some of those because our employees, not just our patients, but our employees enjoy Kindred services as well. And that's the medical services. And there's a lot of, I guess, motivating the employees because of uplifting our team spirit and strengthening our bonds through team building and leveraging on our health and wellness allies and partners when it comes to, and some very specific examples there is creating space for them to, in our new office, we actually have a lounge where our mommies, our new moms, have not just a psychological safe space, but physical safe space to pump and breastfeed, for example. We're a team of millennials, and it just gives them some type of quiet space and break time. Aside from that, we have to make sure that our employees are also have the possibility of, and I think financial and health and mental health also goes hand in hand. And we make sure that there's a succession plan and development plan and a possibility of promotions and salary increases, as we see based on studies that still affects their overall well-being as well, not just specifically on psychological disorders and concerns, but also
Mhm.
financial. And I think combining all of that, right? There's so many people and culture initiatives that we can do, but I think it's most important to tailor fit that to your employees' needs and your company's needs. Because for us, happy employees equals happy customers.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And I think there was a question that came in from Miss Pariato from Baguio. I hope I got your name right. And you were able to answer that in terms of, promoting women's empowerment, assertiveness, mental health, and well-being in this modern new normal society. So I hope we were able to answer your question, Miss Merrill. And then follow up to that, there is a question from Ms. Araujo from Baliwag, Bulacan of Tenko Group of Companies. How were you able to lead multi-generation organizations? So I'm sure that in your organization in Kindred, you have another diverse group, which is the multi-generation. So it's not just about women, but multi-generation. And I'm probably part of that, the baby boomers and then the Gen X and all that. How were you able to lead multi-generation organizations and design policies for wellness while working? Because they
Yeah.
have very different needs.
Oh, that very different needs. Our team, although almost all female, is still very diverse because we come from different backgrounds and age groups, from Gen Z, our interns, our students, and millennials as well, and Gen X. And they all have very different needs. So we have to make sure that we collaborate with each other and understand different work styles. Because we in business, especially in a fast-paced environment, especially in startups, right, there might be conflicts that may arise because of the differences in work styles, for example. So making sure that they understand where each department or each team member is coming from. I'll give a very specific example. Our team is also not just a mix of different age groups, but a mix of healthcare professionals and business professionals. And you see that those two are very different traditionally, right? The care team will always wear their medical hat, and the business team and the ones coming from more startup backgrounds will always be, faster, on the go, more tech savvy. But what I like about the synergies between those departments is that they're learning from each other. Actually, we're creating a new breed of business professionals who understand healthcare very much now because they've learned from our doctors and nurses. And then the doctors and nurses who didn't even know how to use Google Slides or Canva or Notion before, they're already using that, and they're even bragging to their medical colleagues about, hey, do you know this tech tool? Do you know this AI tool? And I'm very proud of that. And it's important that as a leader, you're able to make them come together and realize the differences so that they can keep moving forward.
Absolutely fantastic. So I have another question from for both of you actually, and it's a little bit challenging. This came from Mr. Ed Hewitt, who's saying, why focus on women leaders now? Men are also leaders. So what makes you focus on women leaders and empowerment, since our topic is about women leaders vis-a-vis future of work, wellness, and innovation? Eunice, you want to start?
Yeah, I think my fascination or like my interest is twofold. First, on the comms and media side of it, it's really about representation. Even in 2023, women's stories still do not get as much representation. And specifically, if you're a woman in business, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done on that front. So there's my interest as well. As also someone who belongs to the LGBTQ community, I'm naturally drawn to the stories of people who are othered or more marginalized in that regard. The second part of it is there is still a gap in business, especially when it comes to startups, when it comes to funding,
Mhm.
and people who are in leadership roles. So I definitely want to give space to that particular cohort. Not to say that men don't deserve it, but they've just been more centered in these discussions. So I think it's just about balancing for me. It's not about pushing them out. It's just about balancing for him. So
I
Jess could
love
probably
that.
speak to this as well.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yes, I love
Favorite,
it. I love it. Thank you.
favorite
Jessica, you want
topic.
to say something about it?
Yeah, definitely. Eunice is right, and I just wanted to add to that, right, on the funding part. I'll give another very specific example in the local startup scene. Only 1% of the funding goes to women-led businesses and female founders. So that's a big, not just a gap. We got that's why we have to balance things out. And of course, supporting women in leadership will help shift our attitudes and culture around the gender roles and stereotypes so we can promote a more inclusive and a more inclusive
Yeah.
society. And there's still this, even with the gender gap, it still exists, unfortunately. And
Yeah.
I've experienced it myself, someone, a male counterpart doing same role, but getting paid like 4x, 5x more is something that is being fixed. But
Mhm.
of course, there's not like huge progress there, right?
Yeah.
And I think what we're trying to do, why we're always promoting female founders, female professionals, entrepreneurs, is because traditionally they haven't had that opportunity. So it's more like not trying to get ahead, but be trying to be equals, right? So I think that
Yeah.
that's where we're coming from.
So you know what? The insights and advice and experience you're providing is really very practical and well, very valuable. They're gems, to especially to the people who are attending, are the members in this group. So I'd like to call out that it's 7:49. We promised to stop at 7:50, but if you could allow us to extend for 10 minutes, that would be great because there are still some questions that have been raised, and I really would love to ask those questions from Jessica and Eunice. So we cannot overemphasize the importance of getting this insight. So please allow us to spend a little bit more, 10 minutes more, just so that we can. So let's start with a question from one of our directors. For companies like the company of Jessica Kindred, how do you, Jessica, and other similar entrepreneurs, maybe Eunice, manage the P&L and financial health given the probable high cost of providing benefits like your menstrual leaves and all this that you mentioned? So how do you manage that? Because a lot of organizations would push back in terms of these benefits to women because it's kind of expensive.
Mm. Thank you, Ms. Thelma. If I can answer first,
Sure.
actually, the initiatives that we do at Kindred for our employees, we would consider cost-effective methods. For example, engagement activities, right? It actually, is super low cost, sometimes zero cost, if you have
Okay.
built very good relationships with other suppliers, partners, healthcare allies. They can actually, you'd be surprised so many other companies would support your company. And it's a relationship, right? So we leverage on those type of either free engagement activities, and we do even do that ourselves. For example, having a doctor speaker talk about a specific health concern through a series of webinars. It's, I guess, not really a cost, but more of an effort for us and the time of our doctors. And what I'm very proud of is that not just in the HR team, but also across like leadership team in our organization, they've been very supportive of that. And of course, to manage the PNL, the costs for that is very, very important for us, as we're an early stage startup. So we always look for cost savings and do cost reduction exercises as well.
Efficiency and effectiveness.
But I think, like, when it comes to employees and setting aside a budget for that, it actually goes a long way, because instead of thinking of it as a cost, the benefit to that and the upside to that, when they're more productive and they're happy about what they're doing in their job, is way more valuable than a.
Wonderful. I wish all the entrepreneurs think of you think like you, where manpower expense is not actually an expense, it's an investment to drive further motivation. Which leads me to the next question from another one of our directors. Traditionally, he says, we have accepted the reality that engagement is an important aspect of a well-rounded and complete employee experience and wellness, and may promote tenure and continuing motivation. In this increasingly hybrid or remote working atmosphere, how does engagement, particularly in relation to teamwork and cross-functional collaboration, look like? This is very new to me, Eunice. If you could just, provide that, how do you engage your community in fandom? And then, of course, Jessica, you may want to provide your own perspective on how you drive employee engagement in your workplace.
Yeah, I think engagement in fandoms usually span a range. So as I mentioned earlier, there are people who lurk, basically just consume what's being created and maybe occasionally give feedback. And there are people who are really high engagement. These are active creators, people who start discussions and uh, collect data and curate stuff and archive stuff. So I think in fandoms that tends to be more accepted, as opposed to in more traditional work cultures where you're expected to be in the mid to high engagement level. And I think where work cultures can change for the better is accepting that your people won't always be in the mid to high level engagement all the time. And you need to give them the space to be low engagement. And by low engagement in the work sense, I mean they just come in there to do the work and that's it. You have to let them have their seasons, because when you give them that time to sort of rest and not expect them to be always on all the time, they can be in a better position to give to the
Mhm.
org, because you reduce the risk of burning out, especially for high performers, because I think there's kind of a toxic cycle where people perform well and then you start just giving them more and more and
Yes,
signing them up for special projects or or
yeah,
things
that's
like
good.
that, where you could probably distribute that uh, opportunity more equitably, and that also puts the pressure of your high performers or leaders. And then also
Mhm.
sometimes it's questioning if things are worth it when it comes to pursuing it. So in my previous organization, that was definitely a conversation that I'd have with my team, and then also with our management committee, like, are the goals that we set still reasonable or achievable? Because you might be trying to bite off too much
Yeah,
that then
that's
we can
true.
chew,
That's
and then that leads into, yeah,
prioritization.
it's prioritization. So sometimes you just have to accept, there are things you might not be able to do this year or this quarter, and then you can move
True.
that to a different time frame.
Yeah. Thank you, Eunice. What about you, Jessica? Just a quick one.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I think the global pandemic also has sparked that great resignation in the last couple of years, right? And there's like various factors that influences an employee's decision to resign. But I think when we have extremely low retention rates of talent in the Philippines, that of course it's not helpful overall to the community, but also of course to your company. And in terms of replacing employees, that can cost about 50% to 400%
Sure.
of the annual salary, right? So it actually costs more when you keep when you're not able to keep your employees. And engagement helps with retention. I was saying earlier, little bit goes a long way. And that's the critical issues that HR leaders need to address and are looking to address, because it's already becoming difficult to attract the best candidates in a market that like now has plenty of options on the table, right? And the more talent, but there's also more competition. So I think we need to rethink our efforts to fight back that attrition, and employee engagement is a critical issue leaders are looking to address, and prioritizing wellness and engagement programs to retain that talent is critical, especially these days.
Yeah, that's good. And I have one last question actually, because I'm really an advocate of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one of the things that is very clear, not only in Philippines but global, is the 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 lack of depth and empowerment or participation of women in driving not just the organization but the country. How can we make sure that we don't have gender bias? How can we make sure that it's not about just women? It's not about the you're either a man or a woman or an LGBT and all that. How can but even starting with women, we are bereft of women who do not have access to the right education, to achieve and have that equal level playing field in terms of their career progression, or even policies and procedures around child rearing, breastfeeding, family care, and all that, which is typically a woman, because we bear child, right? We bear children. So what are those things that we need to do in order for us to make sure that women have an opportunity to have an equal level playing field, to have access to resources of the country or of the organization? So being successful women entrepreneurs, my last question is, do you need to sacrifice anything to be successful in life and in work? And if you could kindly share that with us, that would be amazing.
I'm going to be honest. My health has been a thing that has been sacrificed in the past. I've learned from that, certainly. I think the question of like, can we have it all, always comes up when it comes to
Mm,
to women in business. And I think the answer to that is there should be an enabling
yeah.
environment for it. Not just for women actually, but for everyone. If men are to become more active, more present parents as well, or members of society beyond just the workplace, you need to give them the room for it. And that starts with things like communication, healthier boundaries, healthier relationship with work. In the workplace, that's definitely something that can be facilitated by HR making space for these discussions. As in Jessica's case, making literal spaces for people to like gather and feel safe doing their duties as parents, as women. So it starts with those things, and then eventually recording that or formalizing that as policies that people can pass down as your workplace grows, as your company grows. So yeah,
So that's
yes.
good. So thank you. Jess, you want to say something? And maybe this is also your parting word.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Thelma. I think it's the reality that women often like sacrifice something to be able to succeed in business. But I strongly believe that no one should have, men or man or woman, no one should have to sacrifice any part of your life or even your identity to succeed in business or any other field, right? But unfortunately, we face that because of the systemic issues and the structural inequalities. But I think the companies can help with that by as leaders, you educate yourself about your employees' needs and listen to them. Do, employee NPS surveys, feedback, so that you can actually dive into what your company needs. And like I said earlier, happy employees equals happy customers. So it's
Yeah.
quite important for us to be able to design programs around that, whether that's a physical thing, virtual, promotions, development plans, succession plans, extra trainings and educations as well. I mean, you don't have to do it all at once, especially with us. We have a limited budget, but the most important thing is that you're progressing and meeting those needs, even step by step.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful. And the last question, I have to give credit to one of our participants who comes from Singapore, Mr. or Miss Wu. So thank you for the very wonderful question on, yeah, there are trade-offs when you are, and it's not just about women, achieving your goal. You have to understand and be focused, laser focused on where you're going, and understand that there are trade-offs, and if you can live with the trade-offs, then I think you're gonna get what you want. So thank you so much, and I hope that as a takeaway for this session, for this webinar, not only our women participants can get insights from this, I truly encourage our gentlemen participants here to become allies in terms of breaking that institutional bias against women. Rightly or wrongly, we have conscious or unconscious bias, maybe because of our culture, maybe of our upbringing, maybe of how our systems of beliefs and philosophies. Maybe it's about time for us to address and stand out. And I'd like to, maybe in another session, I'd like to run how allyship can fight institutional bias against gender, not only women, but even LGBTs and all that. So with that, thank you so much. I personally felt that it was really a very insightful, and thank you, Jessica and Eunice. You are the new entrepreneurs in this future of work, and you truly represented what work should look like, what the worker should look like in the future, and hopefully the all organization would start looking at creating a roadmap based on you're the trailblazers in this kind of work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Thelma.
All right. So you don't miss out. Subscribe at powerinU.com.ph to get updates on events, webinars, and free resources from POWERinU and its partners. Lastly, everyone can access the recording of this webinar through POWERinU's website, Facebook page, and YouTube channel. Everyone who registered in this webinar will automatically get an invite to POWERinU's next complimentary webinar on July 5, 2023. So our next webinar will be Character Matters. That's interesting. In a society characterized by rapid change and traditional values are challenged, it is more important than ever for leaders to demonstrate character. Join the webinar so you can listen and converse with experienced leaders on why, what, and how character matters. So we also invite you to check out POWERinU's 2023 public training offerings on leading self, powerful storytelling, and leading others. Registration must be made for every 3-hour session you would like to join. Please register to at least 2 sessions and get a discount of 300 pesos off per session. Registration must be done one time to avail of the discount per session. So before we officially end, we would like to request for 10 seconds of your time to answer this short poll so we can get your feedback. You can scan the QR code in the screen or click the link we sent in the chat. Your responses will help us further improve. So thank you in advance for your feedback. Everyone, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again during the learning session on July 5. Bye.